Here's a scene that's probably more familiar than it should be. It's day 11 of a brand new budget. You sat down, you did it properly, you categorized every expense, you found the $43 you were wasting on a streaming service you barely use, you cut the eating out line down to almost nothing, and for about a week and a half, it actually worked. You felt disciplined. You felt like this was finally the version of you that gets it together. And then a coworker's birthday lunch happens, or your kid needs new shoes because the old ones don't fit anymore, which, kids do that, or it's just been a genuinely hard week and you order takeout because cooking felt like one task too many on top of everything else. And the second that happens, something specific occurs in your brain. Not just disappointment, something closer to collapse. The budget didn't bend, it broke. And once it breaks, the whole thing tends to unravel within a week. Because if the plan failed on day 11, what was even the point of days 1 through 10? My name is Miles, and today I want to talk about why that happens to almost everyone who tries to pay off debt through strict budgeting alone, and what actually works instead, because the problem was never your discipline. The problem was the design of the plan you were following. Let's start with why strict budgeting fails so reliably, because I think the personal finance world has spent decades blaming individuals for a structural flaw in the advice itself. A strict zero-based budget, in the kind where every single dollar is assigned a job before the month starts and there's no room for anything that wasn't planned, works beautifully in a spreadsheet. It works terribly in an actual human life for a specific reason. Real life is not a predictable, evenly distributed sequence of expenses. It's lumpy. It's unpredictable. According to a 2023 bank rate survey, 68% of Americans don't have enough savings to cover a $1,000 emergency, which tells you something important. Not that people are bad at planning, but that the frequency of unplanned expenses in an average life is high enough that unplanned is actually the wrong word for it. These things are predictable in aggregate, even when they're unpredictable individually. You don't know which month the car needs brakes. You know that some month this year probably will need something. A strict budget treats every one of those moments as a failure of the plan. And here's the psychological mechanism that makes that so destructive. Research on goal abandonment, including work done on what's sometimes called the what the hell effect in behavioral psychology, originally studied in the context of dieting, shows that a single deviation from a strict plan dramatically increases the likelihood of total abandonment far more than the size of the deviation would logically justify. One cookie doesn't ruin a diet mathematically, but psychologically, one cookie often produces the thought, well, I've already blown it, which produces the rest of the box. The same mechanism runs on a debt payoff budget. One unplanned $80 expense doesn't structurally ruin a debt payoff plan, but it frequently produces the thought that the whole month, and sometimes the whole plan, has been blown. And that thought is what actually kills the progress, not the $80. So the real flaw in strict budgeting for debt payoff isn't that it asks for too much discipline, it's that it has zero margin for being human, and humans generate unplanned expenses at a predictable rate even when each individual expense is unpredictable. A system with zero margin for a guaranteed category of event is a system designed to fail on a schedule. It's just a question of which month. So what actually works instead, let me walk you through a structure that includes the messiness on purpose instead of pretending it won't happen. The first piece is something I'd call the buffer category, and it's the single most important design change in this entire system. Before you build your debt payoff number, before you calculate your aggressive extra payment, you build in a monthly line item. Call it life happens, call it whatever you want. Somewhere between $100 and $250, depending on your income, that exists specifically to absorb the unplanned. Not for fun spending, for the actual unpredictable stuff, the birthday lunch, the shoes. The takeout night you needed more than you needed the $14 it cost. Here's why this changes everything mathematically and psychologically at the same time. When the unplanned expense shows up, it doesn't break the plan because the plan already accounted for something showing up. It just used the category that was built for exactly this. The what the hell effect loses its trigger because there's no moment where the plan visibly fails. Like there's just a category doing its job. People who build this buffer in report dramatically higher adherence to debt payoff plans over 6+ months, not because they're more disciplined, but because their plans stopped requiring superhuman discipline in the first place. The second piece is treating your debt payoff number as a range, not a fixed amount. Most debt payoff content gives you one number, pay $650 a month. Done in 14 months, here's your chart. And that one number becomes the entire measure of success or failure for every single month going forward. Instead, calculate a target and a floor. The target might be $650. The floor, what you commit to no matter what, even in a genuinely bad month, might be $400. Most months you hit the target or get close. Some months the floor is what happens, and that's not a failure. That's the plan working exactly as designed. A debt payoff plan that survives contact with a bad month is dramatically more valuable than a more aggressive plan that gets abandoned in month 4. Run the math on this directly. A $650 monthly payment toward a $9,000 balance at 20% interest gets you to zero in about 15 months. The same balance at $400 a month gets you there in about 28 months. Slower, yes. But 28 months of consistent payments beats 15 months of an aggressive plan that collapses at month 5 and resets the clock to zero, which is what happens to a huge number of people running the rigid version. Now let's talk about the income side, because the part of debt payoff advice that gets the least honest treatment is the assumption that the only lever available to you is cutting expenses. For a lot of people carrying real debt, the expenses are already reasonably lean. There isn't a hidden $400 a month sitting in subscriptions waiting to be found. The math sometimes genuinely requires more money coming in, not less going out. And pretending otherwise is part of why strict budgeting alone so often isn't enough. The mistake most people make on the income side is treating it as a permanent lifestyle change. I need to get a second job, which sounds and is exhausting in a way that's hard to sustain for the multi-year timelines some debt payoffs require. The more sustainable version is treating extra income as a time-limited sprint, specifically tied to the debt, with a defined end date, not an open-ended new normal. Here's what that looks like with real numbers. Say you've got $12,000 in credit card debt at an average rate of 21%. Minimum payments alone, we've covered this math before, would take you past 8 years and cost you more in interest than the original balance. If you commit to 12 months of additional income specifically earmarked for this debt, 10 hours a week of something, delivery driving, freelance work in an existing skill, weekend shifts, at a conservative $18 an hour, that's $720 a month in additional income on top of whatever you're already directing from your regular budget. Combined with even a modest $300 a month from the budget itself, that's just over $1,000 a month, attacking a $12,000 balance, which clears it in about 13 months instead of 8+ years. 13 months of a defined sprint with an actual end date you can see is psychologically completely different from an open-ended commitment to just permanently work more. The defined timeline is what makes it survivable, and this connects back to the buffer category directly. The extra income doesn't all go to debt. A portion of it, say 15 to 20%, goes into the life happens buffer or directly covers the kind of unplanned expense that would otherwise derail the budget-only portion of the plan. And I'll bet the sprint funds both the debt payoff and the flexibility that keeps the whole system from collapsing. There's a third piece to this system that almost never gets mentioned, and it's the one that determines whether any of the math above actually survives contact with month 7, 8, 9. the period where most debt payoff attempts quietly die, not from a single dramatic failure, but from a slow loss of momentum that nobody names until the credit card statement shows the balance crept back up. This is the visibility mechanism. Debt payoff plans that include some form of visible, frequent progress tracking, not monthly, weekly, show meaningfully higher completion rates than plans tracked only at the monthly statement level. The mechanism here is straightforward. A monthly check-in means you go roughly 30 days between feeling any sense of progress, and 30 days is long enough for motivation to fully decay between data points. A weekly check-in, even something as simple as updating a number on a piece of paper on the fridge or a spreadsheet you glance at every Sunday, means you're never more than 7 days from a small, real signal that the plan is working. That signal doesn't need to be large to be effective. It needs to be frequent. So let's put the whole system together, because I want this to be something you can actually build today instead of just an idea you nod along with. Calculate your full debt payoff number. Every balance, every rate, ordered from highest interest to lowest. The avalanche method, because that's the one that's mathematically optimal, and we've established that elsewhere. Build your life happens buffer into the budget before you calculate the extra debt payment, not after. Somewhere between $100 and $250, depending on your situation. Set a target payment and a floor payment, not just a target. Decide right now in advance what the floor is, so a bad month has a defined, dignified landing instead of an undefined collapse. If the math requires it, and for a lot of people carrying real balances, it genuinely does, commit to a defined length income sprint, not an open-ended lifestyle change with a clear end date tied to your projected payoff timeline. And build a weekly visibility ritual, 5 minutes same day, where you update the number and actually look at it move. Now, the thing nobody tells you about debt payoff, the thing that actually determines whether people make it to the final payment or quietly give up somewhere around month 9 when the initial motivation has fully worn off and the balance still feels uncomfortably large, it's not the math. The math, once it's set up properly with a buffer and a floor, basically runs itself. What determines completion is whether the plan accounted for the fact that you are a person living an actual life, not a spreadsheet executing a flawless sequence of decisions for however many months this takes. The version of you on day 1, full of motivation, freshly committed, is not the same version of you that exists on a random Tuesday in month 7 when nothing dramatic has happened. The debt is just still there, and the appeal of the plan has worn into something closer to obligation. A good debt payoff system is built for that version of you specifically, not the motivated version, the tired version, because the tired version is who's actually present for the majority of the timeline. And a system that only works when you're feeling inspired is a system that's only going to work for about 2 weeks. The floor payment exists for the tired version of you. The buffer category exists for the tired version of you. The weekly 5-minute check-in exists because the tired version of you needs a small win more often than the motivated version did. You're not building a plan for your best day. You're building a plan that survives your average one. And here's what actually happens on the final payment, because I want to end with this instead of a generic motivational close. It's not usually dramatic. There's no fireworks moment. It's typically a Tuesday. You check the balance out of habit because you've been checking it every week for over a year, and it says 0. And what you feel in that moment isn't euphoria. It's something quieter, something closer to the absence of a weight you'd stopped consciously noticing because you'd been carrying it so long. That's the actual payoff. It's not the feeling of triumph, the feeling of a thing finally being gone that used to be there every single day. The fastest way out of debt was never about the most aggressive plan on paper. It's the plan you're still running in month 11 because it had enough room in it for an actual human life. Build the buffer, set the floor, track it weekly, and give the tired version of yourself a system they can actually survive.